What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today's conversation is with Jared Jennings. Jared is the founder of Phantom Brands, and this conversation will help you recognize what it actually takes to build and grow a business. Jared is very candid about the path that he took to get where he is, which is very important because, like we talked about once we got off the mic, and I hate to say it, but a lot of times the best conversation really happens when we're not live. And what we talked about once we got off the mic was how entrepreneurship has been made to be this glamorous thing and this easy thing, and how it's so simple, and how you can, you make all this money and blah, 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 blah. And that can happen and it can get easier, but most of the time you're just going to keep getting punched in the face. And Jared's very open about how he, went about starting his first clothing brand and how that went, and how he almost had to shut it down in the beginning because of a guy he hired on Fiverr, and how he transitioned to his next brand, and how he went from corporate America to building his brand, and so on and so forth. So very candid about it. And I think that's why this is so important and why it was such a refreshing conversation. Not that any of the other people we've had on have necessarily been the other way, but just when you see on Instagram and you see on social media people talking about the glamorous life of, entrepreneurship, I would never have life any other way. I could barely envision myself being in corporate America. If I had to do it, I would do it, and that would be the case. But I don't. I have the choice of being an entrepreneur, and I could not envision any other way. But I'm not going to pretend like it's easy. And you should not, if you're going into it, you should not assume it's going to be easy. I believe a lot of people want to be able to go and own their own business. And if you just understand what it's going to take, it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. You're going to get punched in the face. You're going to fall flat on your face a number of times. But guess what? You're going to be much stronger, much more resilient. And as Jared mentioned, again, once we got off the mic, like, you don't know what you can do until you actually go out and you push yourself to try and do it. So there's a lot of great learning lessons in and throughout this conversation. And be sure to share this with anybody who is maybe on the verge of quitting their job, or maybe on the verge of starting their own business. And they just need to be reminded, like, hey, this is what it's going to take. Like, it's going to be hard. And I think it's when you expose the hardness of it, it's actually, you feel more comfortable stepping into that discomfort. So, guys, get out your pen and paper and get ready to enjoy this conversation with Jared Jennings. Jared, your story's very interesting, and I want to start. I want to start at the beginning. I want to start where you transitioned from a corporate job to your first business. So, if you can give me a little bit of your backstory leading up to that point, so that we can understand what led to that transition.
Yeah, I would be happy to. So, the reason I went corporate sales is because I went to school for business management and sales. I wanted to get a very general degree. I didn't want to be kind of limited when it came to business. I also lacked a lot of knowledge of how to really make money. And so I thought, well, I know you can make money in sales. So I'm going to go into sales. That seems simple enough. I've always been able to communicate with people. So I went the sales route, and everybody at my university really pushed this company as one of the great companies to go into. They had a great training program, but they're a massive corporation, right? They're a massive corporation. Of course, I know nothing about company culture, corporate world yet. So this is all very new to me. I'm a deer in headlights. So I take a role at this company, and it's a massive corporate company, like I mentioned, that sells payroll and human resource software. So really the things no one wants to buy, right? Really, if you want to break
Sure.
down like the most basic service SaaS that you could possibly sell, it's going to be payroll to small businesses, which is exactly what I was doing. So I took this role, and this was in 2019 before COVID. And it was an outside sales role. And I really didn't mind the outside sales part. I really did like meeting people. I partnered with accountants. I was selling to small businesses. It really wasn't awful, right? But when COVID came around, things really took a turn because I'm selling to small businesses, right? And they can't even pay rent. They don't have employees at this point. I'm selling payroll for businesses with employees. Like, you need employees that have payroll.
For sure.
So And during this time, I went from outside sales to inside sales. I didn't like this transition. And I later found out that because of the structuring of, again, this big corporation and the pandemic wanting to cut costs, they were trying to have people leave that were in my role, right? So you can kind of make your assumption on how management changed during that time. Management got a little very micromanaged. And I just remember we're moved by pain, right? Like human beings really only take action when things are a need, right? Very rarely are things a want. They have to be a need for us to take action. And I've always dreamt about and thought about owning a business. That's always kind of been in the back of my mind. But it wasn't until I endured the pain and the unfulfillment of this role and during COVID and being micromanaged and feeling underappreciated and feeling like all of these negative emotions where it really was that inflection point of I need to take action. Like, I need to start my own business. This is something I must do. So when I made that decision, I went on a quest to essentially find out what I was going to do. Because again, my only skill set is selling. And when it comes to running a business, there's a lot more you need to handle. So I was a one-trick pony, and I'm like, well, what do I really want to do? And I figured, I remember seeing this in a podcast with Aubrey Marcus, the founder of On It, if you're familiar, and he mentioned that all great founders combine two passions into one business. He mentioned that was sort of the secret sauce. So I started to think about what I actually liked and what I wanted to do. And at the time, I still love fashion, but it was fashion was one of the passions, and then it was spirituality. And I wanted to create a brand that you could wear out and still look really cool, but also have a deeper meaning. And with that, we were off to the races. I started to learn how to do graphic design. I started buying courses. I started taking basically every action I could to get my skill set up. Because as I'm sure you know, and a lot of people in the audience knows, your income is really determined on your skill set, right? And when you own a business, you need to have multiple skill sets in different realms to be able to run the ship. So I was trying to learn them as fast as possible. I'm getting samples, orders, et cetera. And then finally, 8 months after that period of time of learning, I launched my first brand. So that was the story of the up, the down, and then figuring out what I want to do and starting it.
So what was you said you finally got to a point of pain,
Yes.
or you reached your pain tolerance level, maybe is a better way to put it, because I'm sure the pain was there for a while and then it reaches a point. So I'll give you an example. Before I had the podcast, and uh, I had a fitness studio for 10 years. And so I worked with a lot of people who came in because of a pain tolerance level. They reached a level and then they wanted to make a change. Based on where they were on that level would dictate how long they would stick around. So if it was like, hey, I want to do something and I want to kind of start to get in shape, those people would be around for 6 weeks. If it was like, oh, I know I need to do something and I'm starting to feel a little achy, those people would be around for 3 months. And then the ones that were like, dude, I went and put these pants on and I went, what the hell am I doing? What is wrong with me? Like, how did I get to this point? That pain level, that person was around. Like they stuck around. They got results. They had a drastic change in their life because their pain tolerance level was like, bam, like they hit it. So, what was that pain tolerance level for you? And how did you know that juxtaposition? Because you have to know what you're looking for, right? It's like most people just get in corporate job and it's like, okay, this kind of sucks, but I don't really know any different. Like, I don't, yeah, this sucks. Okay. I don't really know any different. I'm just going to kind of keep going, but I know that it just kind of sucks. And maybe this is just what I have to deal with. So why did you not have that mindset? And you were like, I know that there's something else out there. Why did you know there was something else out there?
So the inflection point, and then I'll definitely address how I do. So the inflection point, I remember it so vividly. I was on a one-on-one with my manager. And this, again, we're pandemic. And my role, because I was really good at making partnerships, was starting to lean more towards being like what we called CPA centric. So I would, instead of going with banks, I would partner with accountants because I was just really good at creating partnerships and having referrals. So a lot of my focus was on getting new partnerships and working those partnerships. And I remember during this conversation with my then manager that I was basically ripped into when I was hitting metrics, right? It's one thing if I'm underperforming to, lay it into me. Fair, fair. I'm underperforming. But when you know that you're hitting metrics that everything is agreed upon, and again, back to my previous mention that they were trying to get us to leave, it was such a I have a very low tolerance for disrespect, just as an individual. I'm not sure why. I've always had a very high standard of how I want to be treated. Just kind of always have. And I remember getting off the call, and that was it. I remember getting off the call feeling very disrespected, unjustly reprimanded, and no empathy or sympathy around the context of the situation of what everyone's going through, right? Because it was not normal times and things were changing, right? And it had a ripple effect in our entire market. So it really just hit me. There was genuinely no thought behind it. Like it was quite literally a snap. I have another moment where I had a snap as well. I'll make it very brief, but also during COVID. I've had a thyroid issue in the early stages of my life, and I gained 30 pounds during COVID. I had no idea I did. But I went for a run one day. I had high heart rate. My feet were hurting. My back was hurting. I'm like, what is going on? I went to the doctor, and he essentially told me, you need to go low carb or you're going to have diabetes. Basically, for the rest of your life is basically what he told me. That was another snap.
Wow.
Okay, I'm not going to be a fat guy. I don't want to have diabetes. I'm going to go low carb, right? That's another moment of that snapping where it's just that was it.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of how I knew there was other opportunities out there, thankfully the internet exists, right? And I also have people that are relatively close in my life that have been entrepreneurs. I have a father that's been a long time entrepreneur. He's done a bunch of different other things. So thankfully my mind is open to it's possible, right? So that really planted the seed. And then that moment was just the snap. It was the absolute snap.
Why do you think you, this is just an offhanded question. Why do you think you didn't jump immediately into entrepreneurship? Was it because you said that you had a bunch of people that were convincing you like, hey, this is a good company and this is a way to go? Why do you think you didn't just immediately start there? Not that I think most people who have parents who are entrepreneurs immediately start into entrepreneurship, because I think a lot of them maybe see that and they're like, oh, I don't want to live that life. But it doesn't sound like you really had that. So I don't know what convinced you to go the corporate route in the beginning. Was it really just the people, or did you have something else going in your mind?
No, I think it was a multitude of things. Well, my mother too wanted me to go corporate. Like she really wanted me a little backstory. My parents are immigrants. So my mother's from Colombia, my father's family's from Italy. So my mom had this dream of being like suit and tie, American route. So she was all on board for corporate. I also was in a business school where everyone was going corporate, right? So like the top performers in sales and management were all going to a couple different companies and I went to one of them, but that had amazing training programs, were well established. So that was the culture, that was the influence. And again, that was all I kind of knew. I didn't even consider it. I also probably thought that I needed capital. Maybe I had limiting beliefs, right?
Sure.
But environment does play a big role. And my environment was everybody's doing this. It's going to look great on my LinkedIn. So I'm going to do it. And that was my decision.
That's too funny because 20 years before that, it was this is going to look great on my resume. But I guess LinkedIn is the thing that we're concerned about now. That's too funny. Um, that's cool. So you had the snap moment, you had the inflection moment with the meeting with your manager, and you decided to start the clothing brand. And you said 8 months later you started the brand. What did that 8 months outside of like, let me build all of these skills? Because for sure, like when you start, first of all, I would argue. You said you were a one trick pony. I would argue almost all entrepreneurs who start are one trick pony and they turn themselves into multi trick ponies over time. Like, depending on how quickly you go and how quickly you scale and so on and so forth, you probably have to be a multiple trick pony for a long time. Like, for me with the fitness business, I was for the first, I don't know, year, 18 months or so, I was everything. Like I was everything. Whatever I needed to happen, needed to happen. I needed to unclog toilets. I needed to clean bathrooms. I needed to clean the gym. Needed to run payroll. Needed to do all those things. I was all that for a long time. And then slowly you start to whittle down and then you start to focus on different things. And the point of business is to start to focus on higher level things, of course. But what did that 8 month period kind of look like outside of that? Did you still have your 9 to 5? Were you slowly transitioning over? What did that look like?
I did. So I was juggling both and I was coming to terms with the things I need to understand to launch the business. Again, I had a very small perspective. At this time, I wasn't aware of mentors I could invest in or courses. So I was really trying to navigate it on my own. And I knew that I needed product. Obviously, need a product that I like. So I had to contact manufacturers. I was ordering samples. I was trying to network with other people that were maybe screen printers or people that might know better manufacturers. I also recognized that I need to create unique designs. So I started to learn Adobe and I started to learn how to do vectors and I started to learn how this process works. And then I knew I needed a website. And then I went on Shopify and I made a free account, right? I mean, it's just like I was just
Yep.
trying to knock down every single domino I had to get this thing up. And I lacked such perspective that could have helped me building the foundation, right? I didn't get my master's. I don't have an MBA, so I wasn't thinking about target audience. I was just thinking I want to make cool clothes and I want to sell them,
Hmm.
right? So my
Everybody's going to want this, right?
exactly. Everyone's like me. Everybody has
Yeah.
my taste. Like
Yeah.
all I need is some ads. Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah.
So all my main focus was just on getting to launch point. And then I would be like, I'll figure it out later. And then as soon as I launched, I'm like, wow, I know nothing. Like it was like the ignorance to my own ignorance hit me like a train. And I was like, I know nothing. This is all going to be a lot of work.
That's too funny. So what did it look like after that? You launched and you figured out you knew nothing. Did you fall flat on your face? Or I'll say after you fell flat on your face, how long did it take you to get back up and dust yourself off, and what did that look like?
It was a roller coaster. So launch went great.
Mhm.
Launch went actually really well. And then I wanted to
Time out. When you launched, was it like, hey, I put up my website and I set up ads at the same time? Like, what did launch
launch
look
was
like?
fully organic for me at the time. It was
Mhm.
fully organic, friends and family and referrals. So I was incentivizing all of my network and all of my friends to post by hooking them up with like a discount code and things were kind of rippling like that. But then I got to the point where a few weeks after I wanted to put money behind ads because this was before TikTok Shop. This is before TikTok influencer program, right? Where and a lot of it now is just UGC stuff. But really at that time it was a lot of meta ads. So 3 weeks after I launched, I hired somebody on Fiverr to go into my ad account on Meta. Because again, I don't know anything. I was like playing around. I'm like, this is just like I was like, my head's gonna explode. So I hired somebody to go in and fix everything I messed up, essentially. Now they fixed it, but within a week, I was banned on all platforms. This person, whether they were quote unquote hacked like they say they were, or they did it themselves, were posting like child sexual exploitation on my accounts. I was banned. I was wiped off the internet within a month. Wiped off the
Wow.
internet. Yeah, true story.
Wow.
And just to get an ad account back up took me over a month because I had to create a forwarding domain. Instagram wouldn't I mean, Meta wouldn't verify my passport. Like it was a fiasco. It was a fiasco. These are
Wow.
the things they don't teach you at school, right?
Yeah, well, I can't say that many people have ran into that specific problem. So I would say that, yeah, that's a you got to learn a lot of different skills to go through that
yeah,
for sure.
I was very close to quitting around that time, which is
Hmm.
kind of pathetic because it was only a couple months in when you really think about it. But I really was at that point where I was like, I was losing my mind, quite literally.
Well, because how many problems had you already run into? Like at a certain point, you're like, okay, I can overcome this, and then you get frustrated, and then you figure a few more things out, and then you get frustrated. But it's like, okay, I can do that. I can do that over and over again, and eventually your frustration tolerance kind of increases, and it's like you don't get as frustrated about the small things anymore, and that stuff is stays to the wayside. But still, like especially in the beginning, it's like there's a lot of that accumulates, or just a lot of unknown unknowns. Like I said, your own ignorance just
Yes.
keeps running into you. And in this case, it was partly your own ignorance, but also partly like some dude that screwed you over. So there's nothing you could have done about the B part of it. The guy was the guy, and he was going to screw the next guy over that hired him, whatever that looked like. So certainly it's a lesson learned, but I wouldn't necessarily look at that and go, I really screwed up there. I mean, the guy was just, that's what he was going to do, I feel
You know
like.
what's interesting though is I do take full accountability. And this has actually happened multiple times since I've been an entrepreneur where I've hired without fully grasping what I'm outsourcing and I get burned. And I get burned. This
Give
happened
me,
multiple times.
give me another example.
Another example. Once I got my ad account back, I said, I don't know how to run ads. Quite literally the same thing. And so I went and I hired an agency. And I was like, okay, I want you guys to run my ads. Again, I need to focus on creating product and other things. So I thought at the time, but I really just didn't know what I was doing. So I went and hired an agency and totally unbranded line. Wasted my money. I lost tons of money because I had no skill set or expertise of what I was outsourcing. So I couldn't give proper direction.
Mm.
Right. And I would, if any entrepreneurs listening to this, which probably are, given the podcast, always have a basic understanding of what you're outsourcing. Even if you don't want to do the task, at least have a basic understanding so you can guide and give direction. Like, do not rely on people to the point where they can completely move the needle for you in your business. Because
What does
I've
that
been
look
burned
like,
multiple
having a
times.
basic understanding? What does that look like?
I would, okay, for the ad example,
Mm.
if I just honestly bought like a Facebook ad course or went on YouTube and spent 2 hours watching a tutorial about somebody going through Ad Manager, setting up targeting, talking about the content you need, talking about where the landing page should go, talking about the copy, that genuinely takes 2 hours of your time. And I would have a basic understanding, right? I don't need to be a professional, but I need to know how things are going to be set up and working in what metrics should I even look for, right? I had no idea. And you can honestly get proficient in anything in 2 to 3 hours, right?
For
You
sure.
really can.
Oh
So
yeah,
a lot of people
especially
just,
today. Yep.
especially today, a lot of people just don't want to do that.
Mm.
But you really can. So that's what I would advise on the minimum if you're going to outsource something. At least have a general understanding so you can track if it's even working, right? Because a lot of that gets caught up in the freelancing and the contracting world, et cetera.
Yeah, and I would fully second that. And I'll give you my own screw up example as well. Fiverr example, as a matter of fact. So
Lovely
10
fiber.
years, yeah, right. Well, it's like so there have been some that have been useful because I've used them multiple times,
Totally. Me
but
too.
I've figured out what to use them for, I guess is a great way to put it. So 10 years ago when I first started the business, the studio, I knew I wanted to do online and brick and mortar at the same time. So, because it made sense. I'm like, sure. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Why would I not build something online? So I started literally just creating like full exercise library, online, website, training programs, and so on and so forth. And I'm just like building the back end of it as I'm training and, finally got our first trainer in there so that she could take some of that away and I could go spend more time building this site. And I got to a point where I couldn't figure something out. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was trying to get two softwares, I think, to mesh together for the site so that maybe the videos I don't remember what it was. Anyway, went to Fiverr, found somebody, did a little bit of due diligence. Like I knew to your point, like I knew kind of what I needed to do, but I didn't know how to do it. I just had got to a point where I didn't know how to do it. I'm like, I don't really know what to do now. So I went and found a guy and did a little due diligence on him. Like you got to look around. It's like, all right, 5 stars, cool. Looks like you're a legit person. Hired him. 5 minutes later, he's like, can you help me? I deleted the site. I'm like, you did what? You did you deleted the site? So I had to go back in and figure out how to
What?
undelete the site some way, shape, or form. Like it had like auto saved at some point on WordPress or something like that. So I had to go like reinstall that version and update to that point because it had auto saved a couple days earlier and it was missing a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, oh, dude. So needless to say, there's my example as well. So I get it for sure.
You know, another great hack, now that you were saying that too, is you could hire a consultant for like 45 minutes to just walk you through the basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
On a site like a contracting site and just get the basics, right? Because you genuinely don't know what you're getting if you don't have any idea to your point, what you're hiring for.
For sure. So, lesson learned here is, like you
Likewise.
said, yes, go and figure some things out before you go delegating things or outsourcing things. Like, know what it is, know how it works, know what it's supposed to look like. I would argue do it for some period of time. Like, I would say do it for some period of time, 3 months, like do it, and then outsource it. That way, when someone's doing something and you can see when something goes wrong. You're like, hey, that doesn't make sense. And then you can go to them and point that out.
1000%.
So after you got back up and running, you after the porn guy, um,
Yeah.
you
And
got
by
back.
the way, in like Bangladesh, I mean, it's just
There you
Just a
go.
story out of a cartoon movie. Yeah.
That's great. Um, Not great for you. I mean, it's great. Who am I
Great
kidding?
content. I mean, it's great
Yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah,
podcast. Yeah.
for sure. So you had once you got back up and running, did you have to rebrand the company, like, and everything?
I was a little sneaky about it. So I created a forwarding domain for the ad account. It just had a hyphen, so very small change. Had to create a new Instagram, new Facebook, but I just basically added a period in the username. So everything was very similar because my site was still there. Like my site was still up. So I tweaked things just from a legality standpoint so I could actually run. Now at that point, I hired the bad agency. I lost money. I was also working the influencer route pretty hard. And that was starting to pick up steam. I was starting to get a couple big like reality TV people and music people wearing my merch. Um, and then we kind of keep progressing through the first year. And I hired another ad agency, got burned again. And I said, right back to our conversation, I'm learning this. I'm going to figure out how to do this on my own. There's no way it's this difficult. I bought my first course that I was invested into for clothing brands and e-com and running ads. And I finally figured out how to run ads. So that was a big inflection point. I think I might be on your question though.
No, all
Apologies.
good. You're welcome to continue because it helps with my uh,
The storytelling. Sure.
storytelling, and then it also helps with my questions along the way too. Which I had a question, and it has since escaped me. But let's go back to the geez, oh Pete, where did that question go? Um, so as you were kind of there it was. Were you still doing the 9 to 5? When did you transition out of the 9 to 5? Are you still doing it at this point?
It was towards the end of the first year. So I'm juggling a lot right now.
Hmm.
You have to give up weekends, right?
Naturally.
You have to do things naturally that are going to get your time back. And I think that's one of the hardest personal development sides of entrepreneurship, where not only am I learning tactical strategies for business, but I'm also expanding who I am, right? Like very rapidly. I have a newfound discipline that is very uncomfortable. And a lot of things you need to change. You really are like your business is a mirror to yourself, right? And that first year, not only was I learning business things, but I also was completely morphing into a founder, like really trying to change into a CEO and owner as quick as possible. So obviously giving up weekends, obviously, kind of slacking on work and taking time during the week that I could allocate towards my business. But yeah, at this point, still juggling.
At what point did you decide to give the 9 to 5 up? Did you like hit finally a certain point in sales and you're like, hey, I finally believe that I can take this thing and I can keep going? Was it, hey, work is just like my work is overloaded. I'm exhausted and I need to just drop this thing and move forward? Was it, I feel like I'm at a roadblock and if I don't make this happen now, then I'm not going to be able to take this off? At what point did you decide to do that?
It was a mixture. It was a mixture. During the end of the first year, when I actually figured out how to run ads, I was running my own ads. I picked up a lot of traction in the public figure space. I was having a lot of other big names wear the brand and promote the brand. And I was actually getting into wholesale, which was really nice. So I was getting larger quantity orders with no marketing costs.
Mm.
So that was really, really nice. And around that point is when I broke off. And I said, okay, I'm revenue's picking up. I want to allocate more time. I can always get a job. I can always go back to a job, right? And there does come a time typically where it's another inflection point where you're at kind of the ledge. We have to jump here, right? And
For
I've
sure.
always been okay with risk. I've just always had faith that accruing risk is kind of a part of the game. Like it's really rare that an entrepreneur goes through a zero risk period. That doesn't really happen. So I've always mentally been okay with, okay, I'm gonna incur risk. Things are going to happen. I'm gonna break some things. If things don't work out, I have a backup plan. I can figure it out. I'll find a way to survive. So it was around that point towards the end of the first year.
Yeah, and I think that this is important because my belief is that there's a lot of people out there who kind of have this same trajectory. They start something on the side, they do that thing on the side. That's kind of what they enjoy, but they just keep working and they never let themselves get past that point. It's always just kind of this thing they do on the side, and then eventually they're like, "Oh man, I'm just doing too much. I need to drop this extra thing on the side." Instead of even thinking about letting go of the job, the certainty, the comfort, instead of thinking about letting go of that and sticking with the business. So what would you say to somebody who's thinking about that? I just believe there's a lot of people out there, and I believe there's a lot of people who their lives would be impacted greatly if they decided to take that leap, like that one last step, which is scary. I totally get. I've been an entrepreneur for basically my whole adult life. So I've never had to make that transition, but I've talked to a number of people who have made that transition. So I get totally that it's scary. What would you say to someone who's like on that ledge?
I would say I would actually ask them, what do they want? What is the end goal here? Is the end goal comfort and a medium income? I don't say that in a negative way, right? Because genuinely, your actions are really going to dictate where you end up. So if that is what you desire, you're much better off staying your 9 to 5, right? And there's no shame in that. But if the reason you started the side hustle was for unlimited earning potential and fulfillment and all of these things that you set out to do when you were really excited, right? Then we need to look at what's actually holding you back. And a lot of times it's subconscious limiting beliefs. A lot of times it's comfort, right? People die in the comfort zone. I'm actually thankful for all the weird pain I went through because it really propelled me. I don't know, like if I had a cushy corporate life, I don't know if I'd still be there, right? So these things do matter. So for step one is where are we going? What do we want? What is the end game? Right? Because then we need to work backwards and make those necessary decisions. And if you're not willing to make those decisions or look at yourself and do some reflection about around the fear in your mind of what is holding you back, then maybe this isn't something that coincides with where you are. Right? And that's a hard conversation to have, but it's a necessary one. Because if we say, I want to be this and I want to be that, but we're not taking action, there's a disconnect, right? There's something internally going on. It's not external, it's within. And we need to have those hard conversations, and we really need to look in the mirror and do that inner work, or it's just going to keep yanking you back. That's my personal experience with the inner game and limiting beliefs and all of that, because it's
True.
very, very prevalent.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And you don't recognize it until you've put yourself in a position where you have to make that choice, like
Totally.
where you've been confronted with yourself and you're like, oh, damn, like, okay, got to make a choice now. Like, am I going to
Who
keep
am I?
stepping forward? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You know what I'm saying?
It lies
So,
dormant.
oh, for sure it does until something happens. And generally people don't make that something happen. Like you said, they die in that comfort zone. They stay in that comfort zone and they don't let themselves go to that adversity level or to that challenge level, push themselves beyond that. I hate I don't want to say I hate it, but beyond your comfort zone. Like until you do that, you don't recognize those limiting beliefs are there. Your beliefs about yourself, which is the hard part. Like that's the hard
Mhm.
part to confront, right? My beliefs about who I am and what I'm capable of as a human being, that's the shit that's like,
That's the scariest conversations alive.
oh dude, that's the hard part to really confront. Did you find yourself uh asking yourself your own like set of questions as you were going through this? Like, oh, am I capable of this? Can I actually do this? Did you find yourself having to overcome your own inner
Oh, oh
self-doubt?
yeah. Oh yeah. And I have habits on a daily basis to this day to ensure that I'm moving in the right direction, right? Because at any given moment, I mean, things can pop up. So in the beginning though, I've always been very into like Tony Robbins and personal development. I've always found that very fascinating, right? Creating reality, subconscious mind. But again, it wasn't until I got into entrepreneurship that I really realized how important and how much work there was for me to do. And really taking a hard look at what are the areas that I'm allocating time, energy, resources, everything that are not propelling me towards where I want to go. And it was a lot of vices. It was a lot of just fun, right? It was a lot of things that I knew I enjoyed and I knew were bad for me. And that's very hard to come to terms with. It's also very hard to come to terms with the fact that beyond that, maybe your soft skills suck too, like decision making, leadership. Like, ouch. I remember I was on a call with somebody during a mentorship program, and he basically was like, if you wanted to be at the revenue you want to be at right now, and this was like 7 months into my brand, so I was still like trying to walk. He was like, you would be. It's entirely, it's like the business is entirely because of your skill set. And it hurts so bad, but it was so true. And in the moment, I'm like, you don't understand my market, you don't understand, you don't understand my product, you don't understand my marketing, but it's so true. It needs to be that black and white, right? We either need to get better fast and just be okay with the fact that we need to get better as people to lead our business, or we're going to cower and have no progress, right? And it needs to be that binary because when it is, you can make the decision, be like, yeah, this is going to suck, but it's going to help me in the long run, right? That's really where it got to me for that point.
Yeah, and it's almost worse if it's not that binary because
Oh, for sure.
it's almost because if you just like waver in the middle, then you just kind of become this person that just wavers in the middle, right? You just never really make a
Totally.
decision. You never really step forward or step back. So it's always like, and then you get years down the road and you're like, man, I haven't really done anything, but I've convinced myself that I'm co- willing to do something. I don't know. You just kind of get in that middle part. And that's why I'm again, I'm 100% with you. Like, you got to choose to do it. Just choose to do it. There's like this thing in society now where it's like, oh, you got to have moderation. You got to be. And it's like, no, man, you got to do it. Like, you got to jump in and you got to choose to do it. And I'll give you another example. So I had the fitness studio for 10 years, got out of that last year. I've been just doing the podcast for the last since January, so for the last 9 months or so, because I wanted to kind of like think about what the next steps look like. And now I'm getting antsy again. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get back into business. But I'm like, I don't really feel like starting something again. So I'm going to go ahead and just buy something. And at first, when I started looking around, I'm like, okay, well, the gym got up to, it was only $250,000 a year in revenue. Not a big, uh, you know, uh, swath of revenue by any stretch of the imagination, but it's above average for a fitness studio. So I'm like, okay, we did well, but we didn't do financially well. So like as I started looking, I'm like looking in comparables to the gym. And I'm talking to my buddy about what I'm looking for. And he's like, well, why are you looking for that? Why don't you look for like the next step after that? And I'm like, well, I'm not really. And I started to talk about it and I'm like, oh, so I like stopped for a second and I'm like, okay, all right, I'll look at the next step. And I'm like, okay, so I'll look at like these $500,000 deals. And I'm like, okay, well, and I go to talk to him and I'm like, I'm looking at these $500,000 deals. He's like, Jerry, why are you looking at that one? He's like, what do you want out of a business? And I'm like, here's what I believe. Here's what I wanted to take the gym to. And here's what believe I can do. And he's like, well, why aren't you doing it? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I don't actually believe I can do it. And it was like I was having those epiphany moments as I'm looking for businesses that I'm like, I keep confronting these questions in my mind. Like, can I actually do this? Am I actually capable of this? Like, if I actually do this one, can I actually sustain it and then grow it? So I'm going through like the same sort of thing as I'm looking at these businesses. So like the business I'm looking at now, it's $5 million a year in revenue. It's got $600,000 in cash flow, so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, that scares the shit out of me, but it also very much excites me. So it's like the excitement I think is starting to pull me in that direction, which has been very helpful. But yeah, it's been interesting kind of going through this that same process you're talking about um, as I'm looking through these businesses,
That's a good friend.
right?
That's a good friend. He's really stretching you for your potential
Yeah.
because when we're in our own minds, it's very easy to get comfortable. It's very easy to just like settle in our standards
Mhm.
and not really push ourselves because again, it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable. Like if like I don't want to ask the question of why I'm not at like 10 times my current revenue because like I'm gonna feel like poop. I'm gonna feel like crap, right? It's like these questions make us feel bad, but they ultimately are going to reveal opportunities, right? And really like that is when we grow as uncomfortable it is as it is to ask that question and like really go through that, I think it's great that you're doing it. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Well, I appreciate that. And like I said, like you said, like certainly my buddy's been a big catalyst to that. Like he's just like, Jerry, what do you like? He knows I can do better than that. And I'm like, okay, well, if he knows I can do better than that, then there's no reason why I shouldn't just believe him that I can do better. So I might as well just like do better. At any rate, it's been a fun process. So you went from the clothing brand and what did the next steps look like? Because I know you have Phantom along the lines. Is that in conjunction with the clothing brand? Was there a transition phase there with that as well? Or is that all still like, what's that look like?
Yep. So it's totally Phantom. The team at my old brand went transitioned to Phantom. That was an opportunity that arose from the relationships I built at my previous brand. So because it was streetwear, it was a lot of pro athletes. There was a lot of musicians that we were getting in our product. And so I built these relationships beyond just sending them clothes. I also wanted to have some sort of relationship with these people. And from experience, when you don't have a following and you're starting at ground zero and you're moving a product-based business, a lot of DTC brands lose money in the first 2 years because market education and marketing in general and exposure is very expensive, right? It's gotten a little bit better with influencers and stuff like that, but it's a costly expense to get your product out there to convince people to buy a company they don't know anything about. And I recognize that these individuals that I have a relationship with, they already have a market, right? They already have a following. They would not need to run meta ads. Like they're not going to hire that guy in Bangladesh, right? They can just like wear the clothes organically, wear the product, and then they already have that existing audience, which is going to save them so much headache and make them so much more profitable out the gate. And they also love fashion. And I thought of the concept of basically bundling in entire brand building done for you service for a very niche clientele, right? Because this isn't cheap. So somebody that has the resources, and that's the partnership. It's like we'll align a brand for you. We'll build you at the brand you wish, the brand that you'd wear, we're going to make for you. You won't have to market. You can sell it to your audience. You can grow it with your network, and we do all the work. And within 3 days of launching that company, we signed an NBA player. And that was basically the sign that this is something and this is exciting. And this is such a fantastic opportunity to expand into a much larger market. You could also look at European athletes. There's so many avenues here. So at that point, we transitioned over the designers and the people I've worked with content, et cetera, et cetera. My old brand still sells and we still fulfill orders. But in terms of new products development, it's all going towards Fanta.
Very cool. So what did that how hard was that transition for you? Or what, let me ask, how did you decide to start that? Like, were you just like, I don't know, did someone approach you? Were you looking for something different? Why did you just start to even pursue the idea?
I always liked the concept of having a side of the business that was more profitable in terms of service based, right? Because when you're a product based business, especially again, if you don't have that built in audience, you have cost of goods, you have marketing, like customer acquisition costs. So a lot of things eat at your margin. And so I always thought in my mind the concept of doing something service based, maybe alongside with the DTC, right? Kind of maybe both at the same time. And again, different time, didn't have TikTok. It was a very different time. So for some reason I had a voice in my head, a thought in my head about designing for people because I've always led design. I have other people that work with me, but I've always kind of led like design in my brand. And so I started to reach out to people about design work. That was like the first initial thing. And I had a very big DJ that I was working on a concept with, very interested, and we were going back and forth at the time. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Maybe, the service base, there could be some like need or demand here. And then it expanded beyond that just through thinking workshops and just really brainstorming it out that why don't we package this entire thing, right? There's no upfront cost here. All I have to do is sell it. And when I sell it, we get to work, we do it for them. And that's what started everything. And then once we had that success so quickly, it was like, okay, we're off to the races.
Very nice. It's funny how one thing kind of can lead to another if you're open to the idea of it. I think that's a
Yes.
big part of it is you have to be open to the idea of it, not get yourself stuck too much in the business that you're doing and actually be open to those new ideas. How have you, because it seems like you've been pretty curious throughout all of your, especially your entrepreneurial journey, but throughout your career, was curiosity like something that you had as a kid? Is that something that you feel like you've just kind of cultivated over time?
I've always been very observant, I would say. And I think learning a lesson from my first few months of entrepreneurship and when I really realized how little I knew, I said, this is going to cost me because I know so little. And I think from that experience, it's just so ingrained in me that there's always more to know. Like there's always ask questions, always be seeking information, always be looking for things that make sense for me and how the market's trending. I think the moment that you think you know everything is when you're screwed, right? And I think that again, pain, right? Pain is like the inspiration of everything. It was like the pain of recognizing how ignorant I was has now led to a point where I refuse to be ignorant. Like I refuse because I know it's going to hurt me. So I must stay observant. I must stay vigilant. I must, always invest in courses or people because there's always more to know and there's always a better way to do something. I truly believe it.
No doubt about that. Once you got the Phantom up and running, how did you start to reach out to people? Like you said, you signed your first NBA player. Was he one of the guys that was wearing your clothes?
Yeah, so we had that existing relationship. He
Mm.
knew the quality we could make. He knew the brand I could make, the designs, how it fit him. He was a big fan of the brand. And we got introduced to him through his stylist. But there was an existing relationship there, which made that a very warm conversation, right? Because again, this clientele is very closed off. They're very, um, what's the word? They have a lot of skepticism around bringing new people into their life, right?
Yeah, because
They're
everyone's trying to
not,
sell them something. Everyone's trying to either
of
take
course.
money from them or sell them an idea or so on and so forth.
Yes, of
Mm.
course. So thankfully, I had that built-in trust with that client at the time. And from there, because it's so niche, we only do outbound and word of mouth. So we do outbound from our previous brand as basically our social proof. We're like, hey, this is the brand we've made. Now we can say we've made other brands. But at the beginning, right, when we hadn't done this, we're like, we've done this. We can make you one. We just need to understand like who you are, what you care about, etc. And then from my sales experience, I created basically a sales funnel with an intro call and a closing call and like sales assets. That's where the skills come in, right? Because I couldn't just be a designer doing this. I had to understand how to sell. I had to understand how to create an offer, deliver an offer, right? So that's basically our sales process. And then we also have affiliates and referrals as well.
What has been so over the course of all of this, how long has that journey been? Hadn't been very long.
It total, 3.5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So under 4 years, pretty incredible, by the way. So
Thank
to
you.
be able to do that, pretty incredible.
Thank you.
What would you say the major skills that you've built over that time, like your top handful of skills, 2 to 3 skills maybe that you've built over that time, where you see the biggest turnaround? Like,
ROI.
yeah, ROI,
I think I'm going to categorize it into two different categories, soft and hard, because people sleep on the soft skills.
100%.
Everybody wants to learn how to run a Google ad, but they don't want to learn how to communicate, right? So in terms of soft skills, which I honestly find more important, soft skills, I would say communication, persuasion, influence. Like I would clump those into one skill. And the reason I say that's so important and potentially the most important one is on that first phone call with that first client that I had 3 days after I launched this offer. If I don't know how to communicate, ask questions, build rapport, sell, that one client transformed my whole life because I could then parade, he's fine with it, but like parade him, right? Because he's a big name, be like, hey, we've done this with this client and we can do this and that. And it opened exponential doors, right? And again, for every new meeting after that, if I couldn't hold a meeting, if I didn't look presentable, if I couldn't ask good questions, if I couldn't provide value with my way of communicating, nobody would continue to speak to my company. Nobody would want to come on board. Even though I'm in the brand building e-commerce business, if I'm the face of a company, I need to be presentable and communicate at a very high level, especially when you're talking to these types of people, right? I've sat in Zooms with like a giant boardroom in a sports agency. I'm like, holy cow, okay, like we got to lock in here, right?
Yeah.
But that soft skill is so important for building relationships and acquiring clients. So I would say communication and persuasion very, very, very important. Like incredibly. I would also say for soft skills, punctuality and just being a professional, I think is very important. So, nobody talks about this, but I do find it very important. Just showing up on time, over delivering, right? Communicating quickly, precisely. That is how you acquire top level talent for either like your company or for clients, in my opinion. Now, in terms of hard skills, sales and communication kind of go hand in hand, but I would also say formulating an offer is very important, right? Because this offer is not normal. It's not a standard service that's sold. It's very odd. It took a lot of like creative thinking and thinking outside the box and ignoring a lot of people that said don't do this. So so I think the ability and having the muscle, because everything's kind of like a muscle, you have to train it. Having the muscle to actually create an offer and understand what it is that the person that you're selling to wants, I think is very important. Their pain points and working backwards to create that offer. So I think those are probably the most important skills that have helped me with Phantom and my other brand and coaching, and they're just important on a daily basis.
I would second the soft skills most definitely. I would argue that what differentiates one business from another is really the soft skills, when it comes down
Truly,
to it, right? So,
truly.
like, if you look at just any business and compare it to another business in the same industry selling the same thing, they're both selling the same thing. Sure, their offer might be different. Maybe one's selling it at a different price or a different bundle or whatever, what have you. But generally speaking, it's kind of the same thing. But what really differentiates and what really, and I agree, I am so particular about the professionalism of it.
Yes.
Like at the gym, we did things very on purpose. Like we wore uniforms at the gym. Like our trainers all wore uniforms. They were different colors, like you could choose the color, but you wore uniforms. We had a very strict system on when people walked in, you say their name as soon as they walk through the door. When they come over, if there's new people, make sure you introduce the new people. Like we did things very purposefully. And so, like, I completely am with you when it comes to that professionalism. And those are the ones that people are like, hey, that's a great business. Even if it's just like they just got back to you 5 minutes before the other guy did, or if it's like a business, like a cable business, where it's like, we're going to give you this 8 hour window to be at your business or to be at your home to install your stuff. And the next cable guy's like, I'm going to give you this hour window. You're like, oh, perfect. Like, that's great. Like, it's that kind of stuff that makes a huge difference. And when you can differentiate yourself just by communicating better, just by getting back to someone faster, just by doing some basic stuff like that, that's free and actually more efficient. So, like, why not focus on that?
I think people don't recognize the ROI, and I think something that is never going to change even with AI is people are people. We all crave the same things. And I think the more a founder understands psychology and what humans crave, the better they can be as a founder. Because back to your point about service and deliverability and being professional, right? We all crave feeling respected. We all crave being cared about. We all crave people giving us the time of day, right? These things are never going to change, and everything else is secondary because we're a transaction is between either a person and a person or a company and a company, but there's people in every single realm of that. You're never going to not have to deal with people in any singular transaction, right? And if we can truly understand on a psychological level basic human needs like certainty, right? That's why we have testimonials. That's why they give guarantees. It's not because they need a literal testimonial. It's because they don't want to feel stupid for buying your thing. They don't want to feel embarrassed going back to their wife being like, I bought something and it didn't work out, right? Like people, this is real. Like
Fair.
this is so fundamental that it can't be avoided, and that's why the soft skills are so important.
No doubt. I think about that a lot because the studio that we had was very unique to where we were. Like, I'm sure where you are, like a fitness studio is not a very unique thing. I would imagine that they're pretty much kind of everywhere and not unusual, whether that's a franchise or whether it's just a local studio. But where we were, it's a small to 12,000 population town, mostly rural town. Like if you drive 1 mile this way, you're in the country. And then if you drive, 5 miles that way, you're kind of in the city. And we were like right on the border. Like the country's right here. And then the city's like way up there. But people from the city don't drive that way. People from the country will drive this way. But people from the country could really care less what in the world we have going on. So it's like we had a lot of that getting people to figure out what we do. Like, what do you mean you're not a gym? We are a gym, but we're not a gym. We're not like Planet Fitness. What do you mean you're not like Planet Fitness? Like I can't just come here and work out. Well, no, you pay and you come and you train and we have group training, we have personal training, blah, blah, blah. Why can't I just come here and work out? Well, no, that's not what we do. So like what you're talking about, like getting people to understand what you do.
Mhm.
Oh man, I totally understand. Like I'm I'm totally bought in. I don't know why I just randomly went back to that all of a sudden. But anyway, um,
No, I get it. Totally get
that was a random tantrum. Tantrum.
it.
Jared, dude, I appreciate you. This is a great conversation. Great to hear your story. Great to hear everything you have going on. If people want to reach out and know more and connect with you, what's the easiest way to do that?
Yeah, I'm Jared Jennings on all platforms. JaredJennings.com is my coaching website. If you want to see Phantom Brands, it's phantom-brands.com. But essentially on any social media, you just type in Jared Jennings, you'll find me.
Good brother. Man, I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate everything you have going on, and I appreciate that you're doing it on purpose, especially.
Thank you. No, this was a pleasure. This is one of my favorite conversations I've had so far. So I really appreciate you having me on, man. It was an absolute pleasure.
You got it, man. Until next time.